Our second speaker is Flagstaff's Mayor, Jerry Nabours. Jerry has served as mayor of the city of Flagstaff since 2012, and he's here today to give us an update. I asked him specifically about the city budget, since that's kind of something that they're right in the middle of, and then to answer any questions that we may have about city business. Please help me welcome Mayor Nabours.
Turn on the camera, I have nothing to hide. I am especially appreciative to be doing this at, it's like almost 5 after 7, which was when, exactly 2 years ago, Jeff Orvitz and I were elected. That was the night of the general election, and so that was pretty fun. It's 2 years, and then we took office on June 15th. And the election date has changed now, as you know, so now we'll serve until November instead of the usual June. I am happy to answer any questions, but let me follow up and tell you a little bit about this budget process and where we think we ended up on it. You never get everything you want. I'll start with that. But our goal was to get some money into street maintenance, an adequate amount of money into street maintenance so that we are not going backwards, so that the streets aren't deteriorating faster than we can maintain them. Because as you know, if you save $1 today on the street by not maintaining it, okay, it costs you $3 next year. Fix it just like anything in your house or your car. We need about $4 million a year, and we pushed it up from about 1 to 3, a little over 3. So we're making some inroads, no pun intended on that. And you will be asked probably in November to vote on an additional sales tax to not maintain the roads. Well, that's an issue, but my position is to not maintain the roads, but to restore the pavement that needs to be, in a lot of places, torn out and replaced or milled and overlaid, and some dirt roads that need to be paved, and improvements, not maintenance. So we think we're getting there on the maintenance, and I'll thank Jeff Orvitz for continuing to unrelentingly push on that. We also were going backwards on maintenance on our facilities, all of the city buildings around town. And so we were able to put some money in there to not accomplish everything we need, but to certainly bring that up to a better level so that we're not allowing the buildings to deteriorate, so that, again, it costs $3 next year instead of $1 this year. We were able to do this we got a little bit more money, and by carving some things here and there, and then by doing this crazy shuffling of the different colors of money around, because you can only spend certain monies from certain sources on certain things. And you get used to this pretty quickly, and then you get into the issue, well, that's an ongoing expense, like giving the employees a raise. You can't give them a raise this year and then not have it next year. So that's an ongoing expense, so you have to have an ongoing source of revenue to cover that, as opposed to a one-time expense. Maybe we got a boost this year in some particular category of funds, and so, okay, we can only spend those on something that's one time, that's not a continuing obligation. So anyway, it gets real complicated, but we were able to, there's also the general fund money, and then all these other categories of money. The general fund is what's important. It's about $60 million, and that's where we pay police, fire, administration, parks, most of the things the city does separate from stormwater, which gets its own money on your water bill, sewer, which gets its own money on your water bill, water, and trash. All of these things, you know, they have their own separate source of funds. They're kind of like separate businesses. In fact, they're called the enterprise funds. They are a bunch of businesses that the city runs. We can talk about that, and so those we don't even deal with. Water, you need more money at the water treatment plant. Well, that's your water funds. You know, that's what you have to spend. Don't come asking the general fund for that money. It's on the water bill. So that's where that comes from. So there's very different categories, and it's very interesting to deal with it. Now, one of the things, and again, Jeff was very instrumental in this, is the Affordable Housing Department. We can talk about that, but it had over $2 million of general funds sitting in its account, along with affordable housing funds that could only be used for affordable housing. So we looked at that and said, well, you're not using these general funds. Oh, but we might. On what? We don't know yet. Well, how about if you give the general fund those general fund monies, and then if you need something and you can demonstrate it, we can put that possibly in the budget out of general funds. But if you're not using it, let's have it, because we have a lot of things we can do with it. And so we were able to get half of that 2.6 million. And so that came into the pot, and that went to road maintenance or any of the other general fund expenses. Now, one of the things that's near and dear to my heart, which I take considerable flack for, is the third-party agencies that the city funds. Now, some of these are agencies that the city needs to perform its jobs. That if we didn't have that agency doing the job, we would have to do it in-house. And so those are, in my mind, a pretty good expenditure. And yes, Phoebe Payne is here, and she is very much involved in the homeless shelter. If we did not have a homeless shelter, then we have a real problem, and I want to talk in a minute about the whole homeless issue. Then we'd have a real problem with homeless people, sleeping in alleys or doorways or freezing or whatever. So we kind of need to have a homeless shelter. It's very expensive to take the homeless to the police station, and it's very expensive to take them to the emergency room. So there has to be someplace else. So if the city did not help the homeless shelter stay open and function, then it would cost the city probably considerably more. That, to me, is a good deal. Now, is funding a program at the YMCA similar? Now, see, in my mind, it's not. The YMCA should be out doing fundraising. If you want to give to the YMCA for a fine program, nothing against that program, more power to you. And I get every week, I am at some function that's a fundraising function for a good cause. And I get to choose whether I'm going to contribute to that or not. But there's about 20 things that you fund with your tax money that you got no choice in. And they're all fine things, but you got no choice. And that bothers me considerably. So we give $300,000 to the United Way, which in turn funds these 20 different things. Like I say, some of them I have no problem with. Homeless shelter, guidance center, we can talk about that with the homeless issue. There's several that, fine, better they do it than the city try to do it. But there are many of them that I think these are just They should be out doing their own fundraising. I proposed that we cut that $300,000 by 10%. 10% is all. And I only got 3 votes. Jeff, me, Mark Woodson. So, okay, this is the second year in a row that we've tried to make some cut. And it doesn't fly. Why? Because we have a lot of council members that are all lose votes. There's too many people out there involved in all these different, organizations, and they won't like me if I cut their funding. One thing I have learned, boy, if you want to make people love you, give them money. But watch out, because once you start giving it to them, it is possible to stop. And I talk to some of you, I see the mayors around the state all the time. And so several times I've asked them, hey, what do you guys do about, charitable organizations, United Way, or whatever it may be? They will invariably tell me, don't open that door. Well, it was opened years ago. And to me, it's very bothersome that I can take your tax money and decide what organization gets it and what organization does not. All right, so that's one issue. Budget things, we always have to have a balanced budget. We have a balanced budget. We estimate how much revenue is going to come in and how we can spend it. Here's something, I don't know if you know this or not, but you talk about property tax. Where does our money come from? Property tax, sales tax, and the state gives us some shared revenues. We are not allowed to impose a local income tax, thank God, but because the state has said no city can impose a local income tax, and in exchange for that deal, the state said we will give the cities some of the state income tax. So we get some of that. And we get some, depending on the will of the state, of the gas tax money. Those funds can only be used for streets and street-related things. And that has gone it's gone down about $400,000 a year, but now they're trying to boost that back up. So sales tax brings in, let me back up, because here's an interesting thing about sales tax. You pay 1.7% city sales tax. 7/10 of that, the 1.7, the 0.7 goes strictly to transportation. And that is the bus system, the 4th Street overpass, debt payments, and then some that's left goes into specific projects for road, usually new roads or significant improvements to roads. That's the 0.7. The 1.0 comes to the general fund. That amounts to about $15 million a year. Compare that to the property tax. Now, you pay a lot of property tax, but the majority of the property tax you pay goes to the school districts in one category or another.
What's the other 8% in the sales tax that's not the B part, which makes it 11.447?
State.
State? Okay.
Yeah, good question. State and a little bit of county in there. And your property tax, which is huge, but look at your property tax bill sometime. There must be 15 categories on your property tax bill. Only one of those is for the city general fund, and one of those is for the city, what we call secondary tax, that is only used to pay bonds that have been approved by the voters. So that doesn't go in the general fund. So part of your property tax goes to the general fund. That amounts to $5 million a year. The city's pension contributions are $5 million a year. What the city has to pay to the employees' pension plans is equal to our entire property tax. Now, and that is primarily police and fire. We have a large percentage of contribution.
So there's many cities in the United States that are much larger than Flagstaff in both size and population, Pasadena, California, for instance, that are volunteer. Why don't we move to go to all volunteer fire department and save the salaries and save these pensions?
Here's the interesting thing about that. You can't get out of the pension system because the only, we have, it is considered a contractual obligation to every existing and prior employee that we have to pay their
I
pension.
understand that.
Okay.
If you get rid of all the current employees, not their pension, but at least their pay, then eventually the pensions will, after they will, retire out, it'll be over.
Okay, so the question is, could we function with a volunteer fire department?
Yeah, and the answer is yes. There's lots of cities that are larger that do.
That's an issue. Yeah, I mean, it's an issue I don't know enough about because I've never heard that.
I encourage you to start,
Yeah.
Pasadena, start with that.
Okay, okay.
One thing you might want to consider, though, you're in a very high fire zone. And a lot of the times when you find those volunteer fire, they're not in an area like this that can ignite at any moment and burn the whole place to the ground.
And,
I just moved here. I am amazed of how this place is a tinderbox.
let me add to that. Let me add to that. Forget that it is a fire department because 85% of the calls are medical. It would be better described as the first aid, first medical response department that also does some fires
Pasadena has a volunteer,
for that as well.
yeah.
Okay. But that's very interesting because, we look at the fire department and their department, what needs they have, their general fund. And so we've asked that question, well, why do you need to roll a fire truck to every medical call? Every 911 call rolls a fire truck. You cannot say, hey, can you send me an ambulance or something, No, you get a fire truck whether you want it or not. If there's a person down, fire
We
truck.
gotta change that, Mayor.
2-5 was the vote. Okay. So, budget's boring. What else you want to talk about? Let me tell you where we are on the forest. What?
I did want to touch on the giving to United Way. You were talking about a 10% reduction, but as I understand it, there is a middleman. You want to support the homeless shelter, but you're not actually giving money to the homeless shelter. You're giving it to United Way. And as I understand it, there's 20% of overhead in there. It's administrative
Yeah,
overhead. We give
not
them
quite.
$5 million. They give $4 million. Or I know it's 300,000.
Yeah.
Is there any way to lessen the resistance to budget cuts by simply cutting out the middleman? Go
Right.
ahead, fund the programs that are currently being funded, but instead of cutting 10%, we cut 20% by getting United Way out of the loop, and then whittle at it from there.
Trying to take baby steps. I'm not even getting there. But we have that in mind as a possibility. Yeah.
Along that same vein, is there any way to get it to a vote to where the city of Flagstaff can say, yes, we want to cut 10% to the United Way budget?
No.
No?
That's too much of an administrative fine point. You could say yes or no to or a referendum probably on the budget as a whole.
Okay, but not something that specific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. The forest, you've heard about this forest restoration initiative, FLA. That's not going as quickly as we had hoped, and it looks like it's not going to really start happening for maybe another year. There's big issues about what this company that has the contract now to thin the forest, what in the world they are going to do with the small diameter trees and branches that come out of the forest. They have an idea that they will incinerate those to make heat that makes electricity. But They don't have a plant anywhere near around here to do that. Now, they say, you know, we're going to do that, we're going to build things, but I'll tell you, it's a ways off yet. And it's a great concern because the forest is at risk.
I know that there are some people who are interested in maybe, before basically taking the leftovers for incineration, but putting it to like a public auction for all of that wood first, so that maybe the city can make some money back from the cost of the deforestation, but that was not even discussed. Why was that not discussed?
It is, well, there's a couple of different issues there. The forest restoration is a federal program with the Forest Service, and the Forest Service had this complicated bid process to where you thin the forest and you get the wood as part of the deal. Now, whether that's good or bad, liability is an issue, but that was the deal there. So now if that company wanted to somehow, you know, hey, we have this stack of logs and you can come and get it or bid on it, that would be such a small part of this picture. Well, you know, over here, the yard, Ribland's yard along Route 66, you can see it over between Route 66 and I-40, where they have a big yard just full of wood. They have nothing to do with that wood. Well, imagine that 100 times more, and with nothing to do with it. You have to start doing something or it starts getting bugs and stuff, and so it just wouldn't work. The public use of this wood would be so small, it wouldn't work. Adam?
Yeah, I'd like to just go back to what you were talking about, cutting the 10%. I just want to express a concern. I grew up in Israel until I was young, but I go back every year, and in Israel I know there's a lot of issues with that country as is, but the people are really connected, and they really help each other out, and everyone there seems to be family, whether you know each other or not. And I'm concerned that our country, in America, there's a lot of disconnection, and if there weren't these larger groups helping them, the average person doesn't feel connected enough to those groups to want to support them. And so I'm concerned that if we cut these organizations, that the ones that are really in need, that are receiving the help, will just fall on their face. And I'm just afraid to see that. Because I walk down the streets helping people up all the time, and I can just see that number growing if we do that. But maybe that's not true.
Okay, now is that a social issue or is that a government role, you see? So, and again, I do not have anything against YMCA, Boys Club, Big Brothers, anything else. The question is, not that they should get funds from people, the question is, should they get tax money?
Right. And to follow up on that, my one concern through growing up in America mostly, and being educated here, is it doesn't teach us, our education system didn't seem to teach me at least, to help and give back. So I feel like people aren't necessarily growing up with that, you know, ethic in their heart of giving back to others, other than just say, hey, you need a new iPhone, you need a bigger house, you need a new car, so you really need.
I'll take issue with that because and I go to a lot of fundraising functions, and there is a lot of money in this town raised. So take the American Cancer Society. They do the Climb the Mountain. They raise $30,000. No, $300,000. Yeah, $300,000. Okay, should they not do that and just get $300,000 from the government? You know, that's the question. And so there is tons of money out there. There are people that are willing to give. Now, it's always a struggle. You got to, every fundraising, if you've ever done any fundraising, you know it's a pain, it's a struggle, but that's the way it works. Let me give you an example. Look at Goodwill. Look at what Goodwill does, and they have a model. Hey, give us stuff you don't need. And a lot of the thrift stores, of course, the same way. Give us stuff you don't need. We'll take care of it, we'll process it, we'll sell it, and we'll do good with it. And we don't need any charity to support that. Let me get this fellow on the back.
I'd just like to speak to
point that you said that the schools don't teach us this, right? And you're exactly right. And the reason is because they're government-run schools. When we learn things from our community, although I'm not a religious person, from our churches, our community involvement, then we learn how to give. But when we depend on the government, we learn how to take. And that's the problem.
Yep, good point. Jeff?
I want to know how we can help you get reelected.
Pardon?
I want to know how we can help you get reelected.
Oh. If you support me, spread the word. So spread the word. If there's anybody in here, I know a lot of you have signed my petition, and I have one petition here that has 3 slots left. So if you have not signed my petition and live in the city and are registered to vote in the city, regardless of party, you just have to be a resident. If you would sign my petition, I'll have this one finished up. So I'll put that right there.
You have to be a city resident.
City resident.
Mountaineer doesn't have to.
Mountaineer, hey, get out of here. Yes?
I want to take it back to Fort Bragg because I went to a forum recently and I work environmental issues and stuff. So I want to know what you have done to negotiate with Good Earth Energy, the people who've assumed this contract through the Forest Service, what you have done, if you've done any negotiations to bring more jobs from this major project. It's massive. So, bring more jobs to Flagstaff, maybe see, in terms of how do we reap the economic benefits in this town from something that's, it's kind of beyond us to a degree.
Okay.
Before
Okay.
that, is the contract with the city or is the contract with the National Forest Service?
The Forest Service.
Actually, there's 2 programs. One, the voters approved a $10 million bond for the city to thin parts of the forest. Those are the parts of the forest that the Forest Service was not able to get thinned through the Fry project, mostly because of the terrain. No contractor wanted to go out there and take the wood off of those because it was so difficult and costly. So the Forest Service said, we're not going to do those. Well, they happened to be the areas that were most critical to Flagstaff's watershed. So the voters approved that the city will thin those areas. So the answer to your question is parts are city. The city will contract with someone to do that. Now, hopefully, it would be the same contractor that's already out there doing the Forest Service thinning for Fry. But here's the answer. We were disappointed when Pioneer Forest, whatever it was, received the contract a year or so ago from the Forest Service because there was some questions of whether they could really perform. There was another bidder that we thought was local, that we thought could do it. For whatever reason, Pioneer gets the contract. Pioneer then can't perform, as everybody knew. So they went about a year, and we started lobbying our federal representatives and senators. Hey, this thing is going to be a disaster. We have to get Pioneer out of this. Well, they have a contract. How can we get them out? Well, can we put pressure on to have someone take over their contract? So Good Earth Power shows up, says, yeah, we've made arrangements. We'll take over their contract. We're the greatest company in the world. And so, we looked at them. We go, okay, you got plenty of money. You can do it. They have supposedly a lot of experience. So, all right. So they now have the contract. They hire a company out of Washington State to be the general contractor for the forest thinning. That company is here in town. Now, they've moved here, the Campbell Group, big company. So then, all this time I've been saying, hey, Good Earth, hey, Campbell Group, we have contractors here in Flagstaff that have been in the forest thinning business forever. So, here's their name, cell phones, contacts. You might want to talk to them. Campbell Group, and I meet with the head of the Campbell Group here in town regularly. Hey, what's going on? Well, we're waiting for this. Hey, what's going on? Well, we're waiting for something else now. And long story short is I think we will put a lot of people to work in Flagstaff if this thing can ever get moving. simply because it's too expensive to bring contractors from some other state. Hopefully, it will be. Let me get this building in here.
I just recently moved here from Tahoe, and there we have the bark beetle. And the Forest Service, what they do is they give out permits, and then they go and mark the trees, and they allow people to go and harvest those trees that they have marked. Do you have something like that here? So that people who are burning wood stoves can help go out and thin the forest, and, you know, they sign away their liability, and you say, okay, here's your permit, go out into this section, and you go around and you chop down the trees that the Forest Service has marked, and then you haul it out yourself.
Well, of course, around here, you can get a permit and you can go out and get firewood and you can cut different trees at different seasons and all. And the Forest Service doesn't mark them. There's some limitations on what you can cut and use and all. So we kind of have that, and we also have a specific program for bark beetle elimination, but the Forest Service contracts that out. They'll take an area and they'll say, ribland trucking, ribland logging, you can go out and cut all of the bark beetles, trees, the dead trees. Yeah.
Related to the whole forthright on this issue, we live in a fire-adapted ecosystem. We're going out, we're thinning the forest. It seems like a one-time, hey, we fixed the problem. But we're only kicking the can down the road another 20 years. I mean, as soon as we thin that, time bomb starts again, starts counting down. What is the long-term sustainable solution for what we're in? I know what it is, but we need fire in the ecosystem.
It's fires.
When are we ever
Yeah.
going to be able to get to that level of sustainability? And are we ever going to be able to get there to where it's not such a drain on the taxpayers' money?
And the Forest Service is supposed to be the experts on that. That is their entire role, is to answer that question.
I know. You know very well.
Yes.
To kind of tie back to questions as far as local contractors, two parts. So we expanded the budget for roads. Is there embedded in that some type of something to make sure that some of that money is going to local contractors? And also, when you're dealing with these contractors, you say you talk to them. Does the city have an owner's rep that deals with these contractors to keep them in line?
Ken, are you talking about, say, a road contractor, a paving contractor or something?
But you talk generally.
Any contracts that the city enters into?
Yeah.
Let me tell you a heartbreaking story. The city just put out for bid the extension of water and sewer, I think, or at least water, out to W.L. Gore, out by Flagstaff Ranch. And the bid, something like $1.7 million. The local contractor, been here for a long time, Eagle Mountain Construction, okay, they were second lowest. We're required to give it to the lowest bidder. Okay, $1.7 million. Eagle Mountain was the second lowest bidder by $7,000. And there is no way we are allowed to give them the contract.
Can we switch to a quality-based bid process instead of a lowest bidder? Because lowest bidder does not deliver the best product.
On that, it's the lowest bidder. Yes, if it's an design engineering project, we have that kind of flexibility.
Did you go to a company out of Phoenix?
Yes. Yes, and it's heartbreaking. Now, we were right on the verge of having a 5% preference to a local contractor. Well, this was like not even 1% difference. And so Eagle Mountain would have had that bid easily. There is litigation going with Tucson, who has such a thing, that challenges whether that's allowed. And our city attorney has said, that's real questionable as to whether you can give a local preference. Oh, there's arguments up to here in favor of it. Question is it constitutionally permissible?
Well, I just want to because I mean, this is something I've actually, when I ran for office, I saw this, that we couldn't actually take like a higher bidder, we have to take the lowest bidder. Is there anything that the City of Flagstaff City Council can actually do to change that rule?
No. And if I could tell you, yes, we had the votes. We had the votes. We had numerous sessions, with the city attorney, is this allowed? Is it not allowed? Can we do it? How much percent? And then right when we are ready to do it, then the Goldwater Institute challenged Tucson and said, if you're going to do this, we're suing you. And it's always been questionable. The city attorneys around the state have always said, this I don't know if you can do this. Thank you.
Very